What is up, ladies and gentlemen? My name is Element, and welcome to Throwback Thursday. This is the first episode for the Throwback Thursday series on my channel, and if you've been around the YouTube community for a while, you probably are familiar with what the concept of a Throwback Thursday series is. Gamers go back, revisit old games, talk about them, say how much they loved them or hate them. I'm going to kind of do the same thing, but what I'm going to do different is I'm just going to stick with my own personal history and start you back at the beginning, bring you all the way forward to present day, and in between we're going to have a lot of fun. We're going to talk about some old games, and today we're actually talking about the Stone Age of video games, Atari 2600, before the world knew what Super Nintendo was, or NES, or anything of the sorts. Atari 2600, very first game that I ever played as a very little version of me was Space Invaders, and it was primitive, it was new. Well, it wasn't really new because there had been for earlier attempts at home game consoles, I think. You know, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think ColecoVision came out before Atari. I could be totally wrong. I don't really know my timeline, so correct me on that if I'm wrong, please. But this was the first thing that I knew. I didn't know about anything else other than Atari when I was introduced to it. And the reason I was introduced to it is because I had the good fortune to know this family that lived in my neighborhood when I was growing up, and they helped my family in just about any way that, you know, they possibly could, because growing up, my parents were divorced when I was really young, and I was so young I didn't even know what was going on, and it was just my mother, my brother, and myself, and they would offer, you know, to watch us when she had to go to work, or you know, to come over and help fix things that maybe needed fixed around the house. And it was just a grateful thing that they would do for my family, going out of their way to help. And I will be forever grateful for that. I am sad to say that they are no longer here with us today, but it's a memory that I will take, you know, on throughout my life. And it's an honor for me, actually, to say that, you know, my first video game was on the Atari 2600 way back in the day, before all of this that we have now was ever even thought of. And back then, the Atari 2600 really showed, well, it really showed what the possibilities could be as technology would develop. And Space Invaders, I mean, this obviously, what you're watching, the whole time I'm talking, you're like, this isn't Space Invaders, what the hell is this? This is nothing like Atari. Well, it's because I don't have a working Atari. And even if I did, I'm probably sure I would have the most hard time trying to figure out how to record off of an Atari 2600, but this is gonna have to do. This is like a super updated Xbox 360 version of Space Invaders. It's called Space Invaders Extreme. Lots of flashing colors and power-ups, and it's actually a pretty fun modernized version of Space Invaders. So if you do want a little bit of a nostalgic, you know, experience, check it out. It's available on Marketplace. I just got the trial version, but you can buy a full version of the game. But for this episode, and just for the purpose of it, I just got the trial version. So, you know, check it out if you're interested. But Space Invaders, I think I also played bowling. I think I played Pitfall, and there was, I mean, the Atari had so many games, and I really can't remember how many of them that I played. But the one that definitely does stick out for me is Space Invaders, because I probably spent the most time trying to beat this damn game. And when you're young and you don't really know a whole lot, especially, I think I was 4 or 5 years old, but when you're that young and the game is very, very primitive, it can be a really frustrating experience trying to actually progress and defeat the game. And I mean, if you just remember the joystick, I mean, modern controllers, whoever would have thought that we'd be where we are today with those? Back when we had the one button in the joystick, wasn't really much you could do with it. So yeah, the Atari 2600 and Space Invaders is where I began, and that is the beginning. And the first episode, Space Invaders, you know, this is a project that I'm pretty excited about, so definitely stick around. Next week, I'm going to dive into another game. We're going to stick with Atari for the time being, And then after that, we're going to move on. I'm going to cover so many things that I got to play growing up. and how they sort of shaped my video game preferences. And you're probably going to see a couple games that you yourself really liked and enjoyed as a kid. So let me know in the comments section what you enjoyed as a youngin', you know, growing up. Maybe you yourself are one of those that started on the 360 or the original Xbox or the original PlayStation because you were born later than I was. And let me know what your first game was. My first video game, you're watching it, Space Invaders. Well, not this version, but it was the Atari 2600 version. So thank you very much for watching, and have a good one.